Welcome back to my channel. My name's Lucy and I share videos on the topic of long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome and mind-body approaches that can be used to help those conditions and other mind-body conditions. I also offer coaching to people who are interested in applying this approach to their own recovery and need some support doing that. In today's video, I'm talking to Ellen, who speaks about her recovery from long COVID using a mind-body approach along with mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques. Great, so thank you so much, Ellen, for being here and sharing your story. Just to give a little introduction, Ellen came to work with me after already reading a lot about the mind-body approach, knowing a lot about the mind-body approach, but was getting stuck in a few areas. And so she had already made quite a lot of progress by the time we met, but we worked together for 12 sessions. And today Ellen's going to share her story, which I'm really interested to talk about. So Ellen, tell me a bit about what life was like for you before you got long COVID.
Sure. Well, I really thought everything was going great. I thought everything was going great. I was really, really active and doing all kinds of different sports in the summer, swimming, paddleboarding, riding my bike. I was traveling, I was socializing a ton and working hard. I was an author at the time. I was into writing books and traveling around with my book to different schools before the pandemic started. And I really thought everything was going great. I was healthy. And but what I realized is that there wasn't that much awareness, at the time. I was very disconnected, kind of alienated from my body. So I really didn't know when I was burning the candle at both ends or, driving my body too hard. So that was a discovery that was going to come later.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you share that, because I think a lot of people notice that, but they don't necessarily notice it at the time. Maybe in hindsight, they recognize that maybe they were disconnected from their body in some way, or like you say, they were burning the candle at both ends, or just working really hard, being very busy all of the time.
Being busy,
Um,
that I was like the master of being busy. I was like a human being, doing, not
yeah,
being, now that I've learned so much about mindfulness, I was the doer, and it was
yeah.
a great distraction from a lot of problems, or anxieties that I might have had. I also wanted to add that I was also very disconnected from my mind. I
Mm,
thought that my thoughts were my thought, that I had to believe all my thoughts.
yeah.
So it was really interesting, how this whole journey has happened, that I have a different, a very big change in a lot of different ways in my relationship to my mind and body.
Yeah, yeah. And when did you catch COVID, and what was going on for you when you caught COVID, which then turned into long COVID?
Well, it was Christmas, so I was already pretty stressed because I was hosting both sides of my family, my husband's family and my family as well. And it was in 2021, so it was still, COVID time. And, so it was still out there and there were no, I think there might have been maybe just one round of shots, but I still felt very anxious about catching it. I have asthma, and so was hearing things about, just seeing in the news too, in the numbers in America that were going up. The death rate was scaring me so much, and I have three older children that were coming home, and they're all out from different places living their lives, or one was coming home from college, and just getting people together in a big group, both Christmas Eve and Christmas, was really making me nervous. And, I was definitely scared. And also I was stressed out buying, the normal holiday shopping and, buying presents. And so, I hadn't slept a lot. And so I was pretty much stressed out and tired and like everybody else. And when it came to the actual days, I tried to, just go through and like 2 days after Christmas, my son, he came down with COVID, and I was like, uh-oh. And then 2 days later, I came down with COVID, and it was just a really, really bad flu. Terrible flu, like one of the worst flus that I've gotten, but it only lasted about 2 weeks. And I thought, well, okay, this isn't, and now I've gotten it. Now my big fear of catching it is gone. And so it wasn't until 3 weeks later that we decided to go. I was like, oh, I can travel now. So we hopped on a plane and went to Florida for the first time in, a few years. And yeah, it wasn't until I was realizing that other people were getting better and I wasn't, that I started to, kind of look in like, what's happening in, my body that's not the same. And I hadn't told anybody. I just kind of kept that inside, like, I still am breathless and I'm still really, really tired. And the people that are, also got it at the same time, they're like back to normal. So fear started to sink in.
Yeah. And had you come across long COVID at that point when the fear was setting in? Were you thinking of long COVID as a possibility?
I was thinking like, no way, no chance am I going to be one of these people that get this debilitating, after effects of the virus. I just thought, no. But then, of course, the more I feared that, the more I started looking at the articles and I was trying to see if my symptoms matched up with long COVID symptoms. Now it's too early. It's like 4 weeks after, so I can't go see any of the, try and get help. My GP just said, oh, it's going to take longer, to get better, but you're fine. You're healthy. And so, because my blood test, of course, came all back fine. So yeah, it was an unsettling time because in the back of my mind, I'm like, something does not feel right. And that sinking realization, that something just didn't feel right compared to other people. So
Yeah, and it's very scary to experience that and to have the uncertainty of not knowing when the symptoms will improve or why they're not improving. And like you say, then of course, once we look online, also
wow,
it's
that was
there's so much out there that's really fear-inducing and difficult to read. And so it's understandable why people will get caught into that fear cycle once they become concerned that they might have long COVID. And what was your experience then when you were unwell? So I suppose that was the start of it for you. What was your experience in general when you had long COVID?
So I just, as the months went by, I just wasn't improving, and the headaches and sensitivity to light and to sound, and it was just like every function in my body was dysregulated, or something was just not working the way it used to. I was so breathless. I was so tired and stuck in bed. Like most people, I would try and do just a little walk across my room, and I was breathless and it was very scary. Also, the scariest part was going to try and find an expert that could help me. And just coming up short, either getting the, no, we don't know, or, just saying, oh, this isn't good. But, so all my core fears started to come up too, of like isolation. I wasn't around people anymore. And, just being alone in fear and wanting anything, any specialist, somebody outside of myself to help me with this. And when the answers weren't coming, I mean, I could have done a rap about all the different people that I saw, like cardiologists, neurologists, pulmonologists, laryngo. I mean, it just went on and on because I had so many symptoms going on. And, I tried acupuncture and, just saw so many energy work. And I guess the fear was growing and growing that there was no help out there to come. And, the good thing is that I think what I learned is that sometimes when answers aren't the usual way, that I'm, someone in a lab coat telling me, that I really had to use my inner resources and realize that there were things that I could do. Thank goodness, that was the same time I was going to Brown University and getting my mindfulness based stress reduction certification. So I was learning about what the mind can do to an illness, how it can exacerbate it, how it can, how we relate to things can be so different, how we perceive what is going on.
Yeah, and I think it's great to know a bit about mindfulness and the impact that it has on your body. Is that a course that you had begun before getting long COVID, or did you start that once you got long COVID?
I had been, thinking about this before, and I had enrolled in the course, but then when I wasn't feeling good, it was in January that same year, and I was like, should I? And then I thought, okay, because luckily in the beginning, the symptoms weren't that bad. It was just like, they started to get worse later. So I
Yeah.
took that first 8-week course, and then it helped me so much, just the 8-week course, just being, able to calm my nervous system, just being able to control my thoughts a little bit more, not control them, but, be able to look at them, because the strong thoughts that were coming of hopelessness and uncertainty and fear, were really, really probably the biggest, worse than the symptoms themselves, was the whole, what I was thinking, that I was never going to get better, and the depression that, that came with that. And especially when I was in bed feeling useless, and that I wasn't showing up for the people in my life like I used to. I was a fear of, losing friends, fear of a lot of different things. So I think that really, those skills helped me so much in realizing so many things about myself that I didn't know before, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it can make a huge difference, and especially when you're suffering so much and when you have so much uncertainty and naturally, so many negative thoughts at that time because of not knowing what to do, not knowing how to get better. And of course, meditation and mindfulness can be really helpful for calming the nervous system as well, like you said. You mentioned going to multiple different doctors. Is there anything else that you tried as well as the mindfulness whilst you were unwell in the hope of getting better?
Yes, I tried a few brain retraining. I was hearing about that brain retraining programs like DNRS and the Gupta program. And although I learned some really valuable, you know, um, I guess, tools to help, they didn't resonate with me as much as I hoped that they would. Um, I saw some natural doctors, which kind of gave me, a different outlook on things, that maybe things didn't have to come from medical, that maybe our body does have the capacity to heal itself. And that was kind of new to me, and so I thought, okay, and then, I thought, I was doing some cold immersions at the time, plunging, just to try and help my nervous system as well. And it just really felt good. Like I said, acupuncture was helping a little bit, energy work was helping a little bit, but oh, salt caves, massages, just doing some alternative things that just made me feel better at the time. But what really I think was helpful was, when I was having those crashes over and over again, seeing them is so fearful, and also racking my brain of what did I do beforehand that caused this, when I gave up looking at that and just said a crash is here, and also not shaming myself for, oh, if I hadn't done that exercise, I wouldn't have crashed. That type of thing really helped me to more accept what was happening and actually deal with the problem at hand, instead of the narrative that I was, casting around it. The exacerbation of the symptoms, just by thinking, oh, this is never going to get better, or I just took a big step back, or blaming myself, and I was even worried about my family, about how I would show up. But then I realized, the best way I can show up for them is to actually take care of myself right now, and to
Yeah.
listen to my body, and to be more in touch with it. That's where I finally got really in touch. And, the practices of mindfulness and meditation really helped me, because I did body scans and, some somatic work that really, instead of being in my head all the time with rumination and fear, I was getting into my body and seeing what it needed. And
Yeah.
from there, I could really give it the water, that it needed, or rest, and not feel guilty about that, but actually use that as, a way to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think often we can have so much pressure on ourselves to do well in recovery that unfortunately it can also lead to that self-blame, or feeling like we've made a mistake or done something wrong when a crash comes. Or it can result in just a feeling of being completely out of control because we don't know what caused the crash and we can't figure it out. And it's really tough to be in that cycle of thinking about what it could have been and regretting what we've done. So it sounds like that shift for you into I suppose more acceptance when your symptoms did increase.
And I got more in touch with them too, what they were feeling like, what my body was needing at the time,
Yeah,
and yeah, just looking at that, it was just I know a big part of. I think I also had to honestly go through the 5 or 6 stages of grief,
yeah,
before I could even get to the acceptance part. I was in denial, at first, as I was saying, that this was
yeah,
even a possibility. There's no way, and then I was just angry, like, why me? I
yeah,
was total victim,
yeah,
like, why would this happen, when it's only like 10% of the, whatever. I just was so angry about that. And then, I was sad because all the losses that came. So I had to grieve, the losses, the loss of, at one point I couldn't read. And I'm, a huge reader and writer. I'm a writer, so I couldn't really write either, and exercise and socialization. So I had to grieve those losses in order for me to surrender to, okay, but now where can this shift come? Where can hope come? How can I turn this narrative around to, I am really the bottom of the barrel, to there might be a way out or a
yeah,
way through.
yeah. And there is so much loss, and not being able to do the things you love, like reading, being so isolated, being so physically debilitated. It's a huge change, and I think it's hard for people who haven't gone through this to really understand how challenging is and how scary it really is, because it's like many, many layers of your life have been stripped away from you, taken away from you. So it's a
Really
huge,
quickly too,
yeah.
one day, it's not like it was over time. It was just like the rug was pulled out from under my life. Working became impossible. And I think the social isolation for me, being such a social person, was probably the most difficult too. And exercise, because that was my socialization. Seeing my
Yeah,
walking group or seeing my friends, exercise, and I couldn't partake. It was really, really hard.
yeah. And it's a hard place to be, in that place, and then also to figure out how to find some hope, how to find that openness to the possibility even of recovering and getting better. And what do you think helped you find that hope, or what do you think helped you feel optimistic about getting out of, yeah, that dark place?
Well, I think at one point, in a crash, there was a moment of surrender. Just that, I'm resisting this so much. I don't want this to be here. I want to get rid of it. I want to fix it. And when there weren't answers, all I was doing, I realized, is, making it worse. So it was a moment of, oh, surrender. Like, maybe I just see what might be possible. And then I started looking at, I think it was Raylan Eggel's recovery stories. And when I found her channel, I'm like, oh my gosh, there are people that are recovering. So what are they doing? And what can I be doing? And then I realized, hold on, too. It was a big shift from looking outside, because I was going to every appointment, spending so much time, and that made a whole lot of more fears. And especially if I didn't get the answers I wanted, or putting my trust in, oh, once I get to meet this person, then, but then when that didn't come, I realized I had to really look inside, and I shifted from, looking externally to internally, and seeing how much the body can heal itself if you put it in the right place,
Yeah,
if your mind is in the right mindset. So I had this more of a growth mindset. Like, I had the belief that I could get better, and I kept visualizing, okay, this is what it would look like. And like I told you, that I visualized, a bike ride that I'd not been able to do for 2.5 years, and just looking at that same hill when I'd walk by it really slowly, like, I'll be back for you, instead of saying that's just not ever going to happen again. I, changed that. And I think watching these recovery stories gave me hope, and, realizing, implementing a lot of the mindfulness and meditation, and mind body techniques, really.
yeah,
So when, just a different relationship, even to my body and the symptoms. So when a
yeah,
symptom came on, instead of being like, oh no, here it comes. This is going to be a day breaker, this is going to be it. I'm going to, I would say, oh, so here's, my body telling me that I need to rest and I should listen, and not, there's no shame around that. Or looking at the symptoms that would come on, and instead of fearing them, because they're uncomfortable, they're very uncomfortable, the symptoms that we have. And there's so many different ones. Just saying, oh yeah, the symptom is here. If I had done something previously, like exercise, maybe my body's recalibrating. Maybe, so I used more positive language. Maybe my body is getting a little more bandwidth, and that's a good thing,
Yeah.
and it's also telling me to rest. And so I should rest. And so looking at the symptoms in a different way instead of fear, even if they were uncomfortable, they could be uncomfortable, but they didn't have to be unsafe.
Yeah, and that's a huge mindset shift. And was it through those videos that you came across the mind body approach and started reading lots of mind body books, or where did you
Yes.
first? It was okay.
I think it was Raylan's channel. I think somebody else came on and talked about, David John Sarno and the mind
Yep.
body approach, and Alan Gordon and Schubiner, and then Dr. Becca Kennedy came on, and oh my gosh, I totally resonated with her work. And
Yeah.
it was the fact that she was a medical doctor that used to treat people, and then she shifted her practice to the mind body approach. And so many of the things that she talked about in the personalities of people that had these mind body syndromes, so much like me. And perfectionism and people pleasing, and just getting into fear cycles. And so I thought, this is so interesting. And so I just did so much work on myself. Plus I read like The Body Keeps the Score, which kind of talked about a little bit of trauma and how you can release that too, and how your body really, I was very much in a contracted state for a long time. I was really stiff, and not ever really loose, and like, I had a lot of tension. So releasing that, working with my psychologist, and then finally, working with you, and really getting past that hump, that even though I had these practices and I knew, I had the somatic tracking, which is a mind body tool, I was doing the right things. I couldn't quite get over, until we really started working together, and I got to talk to you about my fears, the fear cycles that were keeping me stuck and keeping me, although I had the knowledge, although I was starting to feel a little better, I couldn't quite exercise what I wanted to, because that spin bike, or the Peloton, just looked so ominous, because it had caused me so much pain in the past, and I didn't nobody wants to go there. But then if I saw it differently, like, that's actually going to be what's going to be, freeing me. And then if I can look at it in a different way, and even if I get symptoms, that I can work with them and also think of them as recalibrating, that my body's actually, needing this to get to the next part, so that the POTS or whatever is going on, can work itself out. So I think that was, working with you, working with someone who has recovered. First of all, every time I met with you, I got, some inspiration, because I know that you had gone through it. You understood everything that I was going through, every single emotion, because you had gone through it yourself. And so your lived experience was just huge for giving me that courage, because you took the leap of faith, because you really do have to have a leap of faith to push yourself just a little bit to get yourself out. So I guess working with someone, and that your understanding and your knowledge of, we worked with parts, your
Yeah.
IFS work, internal family systems work, the fact that I had these parts that wanted to protect me and wouldn't let go easily. But after I worked with you, asking them if they could possibly step aside in service of the fact that, another part could come on that's like, come on, Ellen, you can do it. You can do it. Sometimes that part was a little too cheery and I would go overboard, but it was like, and then we kind of worked about balancing the scared
Yeah.
part, and the go-getter, and then finding more harmony. And it's just all, it was, something came together with all the culmination of what I had been doing during those 12 weeks that I worked with you, that got me to the much more improved.
Yeah, amazing. I think it's really interesting because you knew a lot about the mind body approach and were already implementing it before we met. And
Yes.
I think the mind body approach is for many people, once they get on board with it, it's easy to read a lot of books and understand it and really then understand how it applies to you. But then the application of it is not always 100% straightforward and easy, in part because of the fear cycles that you mentioned. It's very easy to get stuck into a cycle and struggle to get out of it. And also, I suppose, it's about finding exactly how to match the approach to you and figuring out exactly what the challenges are and exactly how to overcome those specific challenges, because it's really like a new way of life and it's a different type of skill set to other areas where we might have achieved a goal in the past. We might have just gone through step one, step two, step three, and pushed ourselves through to attain a goal. Whereas I think with applying a mind body approach for chronic symptoms, it's a bit more nuanced. It's not necessarily easy to learn that when it's a new way of being, really.
No, I totally agree. And, a lot of it comes from awareness. You have to be aware that you're even in these cycles. And I think a lot of times, things that come in from the outside, they're subconscious or they're unconscious. So we're not even aware we have these fears. And I think that's what happened a lot with me. But then when I talked about them, I was like, oh yeah, I brought them to the conscious and I realized that they were the driving factors of me being stuck.
Yeah,
And I think that another thing that also is really hard is we gain evidence of why this is working for us, the mind body approach. Like, the fact that what really got for me was that I was feeling horrible at home, like couldn't do much. And then I went on vacation to Sedona, Arizona, which is a beautiful place in the States where, these great vortexes and mountains. And for some reason, I was able to do more. I wasn't sure. I was like, is it the weather? Is it the elevation? What is it? Then I realized, because if I had broken my leg here, and I went to Sedona, I still couldn't walk. I couldn't, they're just, so that's a physical thing. But then I was like, why is it that I can do more things while I'm more relaxed? I'm on my vacation with my family. I'm eating really healthy food. It's beautiful around me. I'm in awe of everything. And I thought, okay, something is with my nervous system. There's something more coming here that's making me able to do this. So that for me was evidence that, there was something else going on, just not just the physiological symptoms, that I had a part to play in this. When I calmed my nervous system, or, doing breath work is the easiest and fastest way to get your mind and body into a more relaxed state, into more of the parasympathetic state, that all of a sudden I noticed that, wow, I'm feeling better. I'm sleeping
yeah,
better.
yeah,
Everything's looking better. So for me, it was about gathering this evidence that told me that it wasn't just a medical condition that I was stuck in. I could actually, there was a way to go through that had to do with just, recognizing, what was playing in my life and what was keeping me back, especially the fear cycles. But and on the other side, well, what hindered that was all of a sudden I'd get I'd watch a news report on long COVID, and it was, oh, it was probably this way, or it was those spike proteins, or, our immune systems, or, something that the cytokines, which were hurting and then I'd go back into the fear cycle again. And that would really stop my progress. That's what kind of happened before I was seeing you. I kept getting these news messages, or someone would send me a research article, or, a New York Times article that would talk about how it was, there was a mechanism driving this. And then I would put into doubt the fact that the mind body, the mind was really causing these symptoms, because I thought it seems a lot more likely that, the
mm,
virus is still stuck in my stomach or something like that. So
yeah,
that was a problem. And that was also very helpful to work through with you, because even my mast cell activation or whatever I was having, I was crazy rashes, you know, realizing that the mind can create,
mhm,
all kinds of symptoms, and then sticking with that and actually having the full belief, the science behind it, the evidence, and then just taking that track and believing it, going in that and not listening to the noise of the articles and anything else that would come in. That's what really made a big difference in my progress.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to get sucked into another fear-based cycle just by reading an article or seeing a
So
video or
natural.
seeing a news piece about long COVID, because there are so many out there. And it's very normal throughout the whole process of recovery to come in and out of those stages of doubt, and to experience, those different fear cycles coming up at different times, and having to look again at the evidence and look again at the mind body evidence that we have, and figure out how we can move forward and how we can feel more trustful of the approach. And I think going through that a few times does help. I don't know what you think, but does help with building trust, that each time doubt comes up, it's an opportunity for us to work with it, and to think about how we can manage it as we go along through using the mind body approach.
I think so too. And every time doubt came up, and I would talk to you about those, during our weekly visits, we kind of overcame them. And then it kind of gave me a deeper, understanding of them and where that fear came from too. And it solidified my, okay, I'm gonna stay on this track, even though like this carrot would come out saying, oh, it could be this, and you could take this medicine, and you're like, or this antiviral. And I'm like, oh, I want to go that way because it's fast. And like I just want to get this off. I want this. And this is a process. The mind body, approach is a process, and it's a way of thinking, and it's but then I realized it could help me in so many other ways too, like
Yeah,
I'm just changing so many fundamental, I'm not looking at my body as fundamentally broken, which I did for so long, and that was always keeping me behind too. I was thinking like, okay, actually there's more right with me than wrong with me, and that I wasn't broken. I didn't need fixing. I just needed to let time and let healing take place, and to deal with the symptoms as they come up, and to keep my mind, heading in the right direction, instead of every time something came up, a little dip would happen, being, oh no, here we go, and stepping back. So it's kind of a
yeah,
great way to live in life too, anyway, because you always want to kind of keep moving forward with the growth mindset. And really for me also, I just want to say that believing that I could get better was just such uh, that trust that I'm gonna get better, believing that fully with everything I have, anything I would say, anything I would think, any emotion I would have, believing that it could come true, instead of my old thinking for the first year and a half, like, nope, there's a possibility that I'll never get better. And that just led to hopelessness, depression, just a severe sadness that I never felt before, and so it sure did feel good to change over to the positive. And then I saw that positive things started to happen. So
yeah,
I noticed that, with Bruce Lipton's work and that like what you think, and, really your body listens, and it really help. And so that just was, I was living proof of that, that when I changed to the positive and started visualizing positive things happening, and that things did get better. I think my body listened.
yeah. And it's also really tied into this idea that you shared before about parts, that we'll have different parts that come up, and some parts that are really wanting to get better as quickly as possible, and they'll see that shiny pill that might help, and they really really want to go for it. Or the parts that do help us with observing our thoughts, rather than getting stuck into negative thinking. Or the parts, I think it's all about how we have different parts that try to protect us, and sometimes that can be a really helpful way of seeing what's going on. But yeah, it's just so amazing that you were able to get on board with the belief, the full belief that you would get there. And so you also were doing a an exercise program whilst we were working together. Would you like to share a bit about that, or a bit about how you started increasing your activity and your exercise?
Sure. Yes, I was working with a great, yeah, a person that knew a lot about recovery from post-viral syndromes and POTS and things like that. But yeah, I that was I think during the halfway point with working with you, and I was really happy that I was working with you at the time. That's why I was saying the timing was perfect because I was so, I just didn't like that feeling and of crashing, and I was so worried about getting on to the next step, but yeah, she started increasing just in the beginning, just doing very gentle exercises that were more to get apparently the blood flow, or at least in my case, the blood flow was coming out, but it wasn't going back up so well. So there'd be a lot of some squats, some calf raises and stuff, just some physical exercises that I could do to try and get blood pumping and circulating better. And I did actually notice that, that some of the brain fog was clearing a little bit too. I think I just didn't have enough oxygen and blood in my brain. But so yeah, that was really helpful. But it was just getting over the hump of fear to even do the exercises and to not think about the future, which is the next day. For me, it was always 24 hours later. If post-exertional malaise was the cause, I'm not sure, but it was just didn't feel good the next day, and a lot of crashing. But and if that did happen, she kind of told me that, and we worked on the fact that it's okay, that well, first of all, there's going to be a little soreness from not having worked out for 2.5 years anyway, and that's normal. And normally, if you get sore, no one gets scared about that, like it's just sort of like, oh boy, am I sore today? So I tried to have that type of mentality with my symptoms, like, okay, yeah, of course I'd be a little sore, or of course I might have a little bit of an activation of symptoms because I'm doing something different. And so then we started on the Peloton doing just a few minutes at a time, and then she would bring my heart rate on a certain up and down. And yeah, it was more really about using though the tools that I knew that
Yeah,
to get me, out of the fear thinking and more into the, okay, these are just symptoms, and that I don't have to be fearful of them. That I don't have to,
yeah,
I can send safety signals to the brain. And I did that through breath work, through meditation, through relaxing my body and just letting those, feelings kind of pass because they always do. Even a crash never lasted. So I always saw the symptoms as impermanent, even
yeah,
if they were there. So, and even if there was a big uptick in them. So, and eventually after, 3 or 4 weeks, I wasn't feeling those as much and I couldn't believe it. I was like, is this really happening? And I was just so happy to report to you. And then I felt more encouraged to do a little bit more and a
yeah,
little bit more. And, that first bike ride that I sent a video to you,
yeah,
was just the most amazing feeling I've had. Like, didn't show me like crying at the end because I was just like, I just rode this hill that was unavailable to me for, almost 3 years. And there I was going up it, and my heart didn't go crazy, and because I had a different mindset, I totally changed my mindset. Instead of like the fear of, oh no, here it comes, this is going to be bad. It was like, okay, here I go. And, I'm just going to think that everything's, going to work. And don't forget, it was time. And I led up to that with 6 weeks
yeah,
of training before that. But yeah, just a different mindset. And if something happened the next day, I dealt with it. Like,
yeah,
okay, that was a major challenge that you went up that big hill. And so it would be okay and safe for me to have some symptoms come up. So it was like I totally changed my view, first from outside help into what I could do myself, and the fact that the body really does know how to heal itself. I didn't really believe that it ever did. But if we give it space, if we get into, the rest and digest state where that's where healing takes place, so many good things can happen. And I really believed it always had to come from, someone with a lab coat. And not to say that, that isn't, because a lot of these symptoms, do need help. But for me, it was a big change to think that I had some agency and
yeah,
some control
yeah.
in my recovery, instead of just being someone that didn't have any, power. I just had to wait till somebody came up with an answer.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
that
I
taking
think
taking and active participation in my recovery. That was huge.
Yeah, I think having agency is so important, and also managing all of those challenges as they come up, and each challenge, with increasing activity and with Peloton and starting to cycle again and starting to calf raises and squats and all of those different things. Like you say, symptoms might come up afterwards. And it's how best can you manage with the fear, with the concern, with the everything that comes with symptoms increasing. And you manage that really well. But also it's that resilience and that knowing that this is part of the approach. This is part of it, that the challenges, it doesn't just become easy all of a sudden. For most people, it takes time, and there are ups and downs throughout
Right. And
the
there are natural emotions that are going to come in that,
yeah.
that are going to maybe even exacerbate our symptoms. So,
Mm,
I would always look back like, was there a lot of fear behind this before I started it? Or was there something that
yeah.
was really bothering me that was, so I'd always try and come back to what emotion
Yeah.
also was there. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of parts to this, but when it all came together, mind and body, the
Yeah.
mind body approach, then it was incredible to think that our mind has so much to do with our body. I mean, you think that when you get embarrassed and you blush,
Yeah.
or you get anxious and you sweat, like that's already showing mind body,
Yeah.
So this, I just took it to another level and helped
Yeah.
it, for my recovery too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how far you came. And do you want to share a little bit about how things are for you now, what you're doing, and how life is now that you feel better and you have more capacity?
Yeah, sure. So I feel, a much, much better. I can do so many more things than I could do, in the last few years. I'm working. Opened a business called Stress Less Studio, and I'm actually helping people with long COVID because I just feel like there's so many things that helped me, and also working with other people, it still manages to help me. I get inspired by people every day, and so I just implement the practices that helped me, the mind body practices like breath work and meditation and mindfulness, things that I studied anyway, and I have a certification in breath work. So all these practices that helped me get through the fear cycles and to manage the crashes. I'm doing that with other people now, and now I can read again, write again, and yeah, I can travel and socialize, which is, such a big it was just a big part of my life. So I feel like if there's been this amazing rediscovery of, in a better way. I'm a lot slower, I'm more intentional
Yeah.
now. I actually notice when I'm overtired or when I've done too much, which I never had that capacity to know before. So this rediscovery of my mind and how it works, and how I can shift it when I'm not happy with what it's replaying. And then my body now noticing things, the symptoms that I never would have been aware of, I would have driven right through. If I got nervous about something and my stomach was hurting, well, that's okay, let's just keep going. I'm tired, nope, let's just keep working until I finish the project. So now I'm just so much more aware of things, and life is really much better because I think I'm just a little more in tune, at peace for sure, and not just doing a lot of what my old parts used to do, people pleasing and be trying to be a perfectionist and trying to just show up for people the way they wanted me to. Now I've really just kind of realized that I'm more just accepting of who I am, and
Yeah.
what's happening. So it's been really good.
Yeah, amazing. And it's so great that you're working with other people who have long COVID as well, because there's so many people out there suffering and that need help and that benefit from meditation and breathing and understanding what's going on for them. And as you say, I think often we change a lot through this process and we become a better version of ourselves. And it can take such a huge adversity, such as long COVID, to actually realize some things about ourselves and to realize that maybe living in a different way is more aligned for us or feels better for us.
I think so. All that doing was great at the time. And I
Yeah.
didn't know that there was anything different. But now that I'm doing more being and, I go take a walk and I'm like, oh my God, what was I missing all this time? It's so beautiful. And just sitting like little things now, a meal or whatever, or so much more now that, looking into the mindfulness is just, yeah, I just feel like such a bigger appreciation for the gifts that I have and the life that I have. And things out in nature that are given to us, naturally, which I might have just walked right by before.
Yeah. And I'll share your links below, Ellen, so that people can get in touch with you if they're interested in contacting you or seeing what you do in terms of the Stress Less Studio. And is there anything else, any parting words that you'd like to share? Any little tips that you think people could take away from your experience of going through this process?
Yeah, I mean, I just think of the first 6, months actually or so of this and the fear that I had. And it's so fearful when your body is not feeling good. You want to do anything to get it to stop and to get it off you, or to run away from it or whatever. And I would just say to, try and be with yourself and realize that we have so much more capabilities in a bit inside ourselves. Watch what your mind is doing and what it's telling you. It might be leading you in a way that is not helping the narrative that you have, because that was huge for me. And just looking into your body, and being more in touch with it, maybe getting out of your head just a little bit and seeing if you can go in. The other last thing I would just say is compassion, because I didn't ever have very much compassion for myself. I was like, come on, get better. Like, what is going on? People were asking me, like, you're not better yet? This is after a year. And I would
Mm,
say, no. And I don't know why I'm so mad. Like, I don't know. And then finally, I changed that around to, well, sheesh, I don't want this to be happening. I don't want to be suffering. I don't want this to be happening. And, but it is happening right now. But I can be grateful for the things that I can do. And I can be very appreciative of my heart that is trying to beat regularly, or my lungs that are trying to pump as much, oxygen as they can. And, all the different parts of my body that are trying to get back to regulation. Instead of shaming it or blaming it, I was doing more compassion and saying, like, you can do this and you've got this. And it's it was just kind of like what I would say to somebody else. It's so hard to
yeah,
do for your own self, but if somebody
yeah.
else was. So that's all I would say is, the blame and shame and narratives sometimes don't help. It's when we really look inside and say, like, but what can help, and how can I
Yeah.
work through this? And also just not giving up.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's so important that power from within and also the self-compassion and just being persistent and finding that hope wherever people can, because it's really challenging. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I think people gain a lot from hearing people talk about their experience of using a mind body approach and what helped and the different challenges. So Ellen, thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And thanks again for working with me and, inspiring me and coaching me through this whole, recovery process. It has been, not only are you fun and just like really friendly, but also, I learned a lot from you and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Oh, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I've been so delighted to see your progress and to see the video of you cycling up that hill. And yeah, it's so rewarding for me as well, just to see that you're back doing what you enjoy doing. So after we stopped recording, Ellen and I had a discussion about how with a mind body approach, we still need to keep using the tools and the approach and managing different challenges that arise throughout the process of recovery and getting back to life again. And we were both sharing that it's not a situation where all of a sudden we have a new life and everything's great and everything's easy. The challenges do still come up, and that it is still a process. And we both said, actually, this is something we would like to share at the end of the video as well, just to help people understand that whilst we're talking about the recovery and the great recovery that Ellen has had and everything that she's now able to do that she wasn't able to do before, that also there's still naturally going to be challenges ahead, and that using a mind-body approach and using the tools and techniques are something that, whilst we might not need to do every single day of our lives, we might need to do again in future. And depending on what's going on in life, we might be faced with new challenges and new situations, or we might be pulled back into old habits or old ways of being where we need to work on that. So I think it's helpful just to also put that perspective in, because it's more realistic about what the reality actually is when people recover. There's still challenges ahead, and that we're still working to manage having a new way of being and living in a new way and doing things differently. So thank you as always for watching this video. If you're interested in coaching, following me on Instagram or Facebook, I'll leave links in the description below. As I said before, I'll also leave links to Ellen's website and Ellen's details so that you can get in touch with her as well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.